Greetings. I've been asked a couple of times recently about my character Octavia, and people have wanted to know more, and I asked what her origin is, and I had to confess I don't know what her origin is, and no one knows. It's very mysterious. So I don't know how many other characters don't have a mysterious origin. I don't even think the Phantom was that mysterious. I think he had one, and the Shadow had an alter ego. But anyway, at least from my perspective, I know how she behaves, what she does, and in terms of her creation, back when I did the first drawing of her, I had several things in mind. One was to create my own character, which was basically using a red costume, but to try and counteract the total popularity of Vampirella. And Vampirella's costume doesn't leave much to the imagination, and the character herself, you wonder if there even is a character or if it's just a costume. But with Octavia's costume, I wanted to have a bit more modesty and have her be basically powerful and in charge, and less of a reliance on sexual pandering. So Vampirella was definitely influence number one, or maybe not. We'll just make it number one. I don't know. I don't think it's the greatest influence, because the greatest influence was the film Bloody Pit of Horror. And if you've seen this film, it's deliciously bad. It's one of the best, worst films of all time. It has a lot of immortal dialogue in it, spoken by the character, the Crimson Executioner, who is masked and wears red costumes. And I used that look in the Octavia comics for Octavia's bodyguards. So anyway, that movie was shot in Italy, and for the first Octavia issue, I lifted whole bits of dialogue and stuff from that film. I didn't feel bad about doing it at all. I actually dedicated that issue to the actor Mickey Hargitay. I sent him a copy of it too in California. He was Jane Mansfield's husband, and I didn't hear from him. I suspect he's probably trying to forget the movie, but at any rate, I always thought he was a nice guy. So anyway, Bloody Pit of Horror was a definite influence, and there's a lot of torture in the movie, which, considering how bad the movie is, it's kind of hard to take the torture seriously. So it's like, it creates a strange duality of intense pain and laughable ridiculousness. And anyway, if you've got a strong stomach and some time to spare, you can watch that movie. When I originally saw it at a drive-in in South Carolina, and I'm not even sure what year it would be, in the 80s, I went back and saw it every night that week, and took a bunch of friends at one point too. So it was a powerfully influential movie. Now the last influence was the Russian comic book character called Octaviana, which actually apparently was a hoax. Someone published a book that claimed that there was an underground group called Political Pornographers or something in Russia, and they created this character with communistic overtones, superheroine sort of thing. Not super powered, but probably actually more like the French Barbarella. So anyway, Octaviana, there's similarities. Octavia is an actual name, like Octavia Butler. There's a little bit of similarity, but partly because that character was a hoax, I didn't feel so bad borrowing a little bit from it. Otherwise, I'm very, very fastidious about not capitalizing on characters that I didn't create. I don't feel comfortable doing that. I could have gone a lot further probably in this business if I'd drawn every other superhero, characters by all sorts of other people, and I don't know, I just can't do it. So anyway, when I began the first issue, I had a very, very meticulous technique which I used to draw it. And I used very, very good quality Bristol board. And what I would do is I would design the page or script the page and then draw each panel on the page, flip the page over, put it on a light box where all the images are now reversed, and I would look at them and fine-tune them, check symmetries and things like that, polish them, tighten them up more, and then turn it back over again, erase the first pencils that I did, and retrace through the second pencil. So I essentially drew the thing 3 times before inking, and then I inked it old school with brush and pen, dip pen, and used Leroy lettering for it, like EC Comics, which I thought would fit the mood and everything. So anyway, that was a point when I was living in New Mexico when I did that. During that job, I can remember I began getting headaches, which didn't go away. They would last all the time, and I went to a doctor for it, and they said, "You're overworking yourself." So that's when I began to take some time off and do some other things. I began doing yoga and other stuff like that. So anyway, that was the way that I drew the comic. The comic survived a couple more issues, but I had so many other things going on that I continued to do more drawings and paintings of the character, releasing at one point an Octavia pinup book where a lot of well-known artists contributed and some unknown people. And that was a blast. That's still available as a download, I believe. But anyway, ultimately I wound up writing 2 novelettes, short pieces about Octavia. And what I wanted to do, in addition to just write something that had no pictures, I wanted to work on visualization, strictly visualization in words with no pictures. The books themselves, I'm sure would have sold much better had I illustrated them, because my audience, that's kind of what they want or what they expect. But outside of the covers, I refused to do that. And even the early covers, I used at one point I used photographs for the covers, basically saying, no pictures this time. You have to read it. And of course, people's time is very limited. I know mine is, and who's got time to read a book anymore, especially by some unknown New York Times bestseller author or whatever. But anyway, the novels were very interesting experience to write, and they took the character a good bit further. There again, her character, the stories are more about the people around her. She's a sort of an immovable object or something, a power, and you're never really sure who she is, what her motivations are. She's a bit of a sorceress, perhaps immortal shamanistic sorceress, and then also able to use scientific methods like a mad scientist would, and you have these things combined, and how it affects the people in the situations is what they were about. So the first one was called The Gemini Ring, and here again it's about the man who visited Octavia at the remote castle in Spain for various reasons, and eventually becomes enslaved to her, and helps her to create machinery in her laboratory. At one point he goes out with her and her other underling collecting larvae, butterfly larvae from trees. He climbs the trees and shakes the limbs, and they fall, and they collect them in a sheet and take them back to the laboratory and have them up by the ceiling in the castle in these large cages, and they eventually, when they hatch, she sends them through a machine, which is the Gemini Ring. They go in one end, and when they come out the other end, they're a humanoid that is based on butterflies. And ultimately, what happens to the fellow who's come from the newspaper in Rome to investigate her is like, you can't go anywhere. You go. He gets sent into the machine going the other way, and he comes out as a flock of birds which fly out the window and are gone. So was he ever a man to begin with, or was she just a servant to him? And the second novel, The Ice Caves, same sort of thing. Fantastic imagery, takes place in the Alps. Highly recommended, of course, by yours truly. But they are very short and sweet, quick to read. So anyway, that's kind of where we are with Octavia right now. Don't know what else is going to happen. Probably no more comics or anything like that, but it's done, and it's established, and it's there.